I'm very pleased he can join us, and that he has made the time to join us this week. His name is Larry Sanger, and he is the former founder of Wikipedia. He'll tell us his story, no doubt, again, but a lot of people will be familiar with Larry. He's been very vocal on the issue of free speech, on the issue of information liberation, decentralization, a lot of these important topics, and some things have come into the news of recent. We definitely want to get your opinion on Larry, among other things. A lot has gone on in the world of speech and information over the last couple of years. I know you've been on the forefront of this issue for your whole career, pretty much, and you continue to be pushing the envelope on it. I want to hear about your projects as well, which you're working on. We'll talk about those and show people where to find your work there. But first of all, welcome to the program, Larry.
Thanks, Patrick. It's good to be back.
And just for the people who aren't familiar with your story, Larry, tell us a little bit about how you got to this point in your career. Tell us about your early days of Wikipedia. That's a website everybody uses, everybody's familiar with, everybody knows, but there's a story behind there. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight there just to begin with, but go ahead.
Maybe a little bit. I got my PhD in philosophy, and I was finishing up the dissertation and proposing a website to acquaintances of mine, one of whom was Jimmy Wales, and he said that he had been he'd registered a domain name, newpedia.com. And then he wanted to start a free encyclopedia that would sort of do for encyclopedias what open source software does for software, something to be free for everyone to use and contribute to. So to make a long story short, I went to work. It was my job basically is to start the project, and it started slowly. And so we were looking around for new ideas about how to basically speed up the process. And a friend told me about wikis. And so I proposed, well, let's start a wiki. And so we did. And well, I guess the rest is history. It moved much faster than the previous incarnation. But unfortunately, it was starting at just about the time that the bottom fell out of the old late 1990s dot-com boom, for people who remember that. So boom was turning to bust just as Wikipedia was taking off. And so I kind of left. But then I completely, after I left, I completely cut ties with Wikipedia, and I've never really looked back except critically, because, well, a number of different problems. I guess I won't get into the problems that I had back then now.
So when Wikipedia started, did you have a different vision for this website, how it would interact with the world than what it has become now? Was there a kind of a divergence in the vision of what you thought it could be as opposed to what it has become?
Yes. For one thing, back then, I had no idea that it was going to get as huge as it is now and as quickly as it did. That was quite a shock to me. The other thing, though, that is a disappointment, really, is that my notion was that if we had people from all around the world contributing to an encyclopedia, then naturally you would want there to be reasonable ground rules where people of widely divergent opinions could work with each other. But actually and it works that way sort of more or less for the first several years. But then gradually the establishment, and I would say the establishment left, but mostly it's just the establishment, turned the screws, locked it down. And so that now only if you're able to cite certain kinds of establishment secondary sources, not primary sources, not tertiary sources. Only if you're able to cite just items from those sources can you state the truth. If they don't have the truth, if they have a skewed version of the truth, then it's not going to be in Wikipedia. So that's a big problem with Wikipedia. They need to open up the sources that are available to be used. But that's just one example. Basically, it has become very biased.
And also, you talk about this. I know you've on social media, on Twitter, now X, you were really vocal about the, one of the was the moderator editor process, the community that was built, a community that you built the first version of it at Wikipedia, but then it kind of became something else. And you've talked about the danger that it could be gamed, that this type of crowdsource editing or communal editing can be gamed by certain agencies, be they PR agencies with enough money or intelligence services. Mm-hmm. And do you think this has happened with Wikipedia?
Definitely, it's happened. I think any online information source, especially if it's quite open, as Wikipedia is, at least nominally, is ripe for being gamed. And so, yeah, especially after it became really, really important, then I mean, why wouldn't various spy agencies and corporate PR, divisions and companies pour lots of money into making sure that the articles, which are taken as basically objective truth by a lot of people, why wouldn't they be controlled? Now, do we have a lot of direct evidence of this? Yes and no, actually. I mean, I have seen, I've actually talked to, I think 3 or 4 different CEOs of PR firms that specialize in writing articles for corporations. So that's a fact. We know that for sure. I think it was 2008, 2007, Virgil Griffith did, as part of his, I think it was his master's degree research, made something called the Wiki Scanner. You can look it up. And there were a lot of IP addresses that were editing. He systematically mapped all this stuff out, a lot of IP addresses from Langley, Virginia, the headquarters of the CIA. So as I've said to others, do you think they stopped? Why would they have stopped? So probably not. So we've got that evidence, but we don't know how it works on the inside. It's a black box, really. There is a lot of back channel communication going on in Wikipedia. Now, to a certain extent, there's a game played on the talk pages. So like if you go to a Wikipedia page about, I don't know, Barack Obama or Donald Trump or whatever, or Biden or Israel, you will see edit wars, essentially, except not really so much controversy anymore. There is some, for sure, but the people who are in control of the different pages and different portions of Wikipedia are able to shut down dissenting voices pretty quickly now. And again, we have some people crowing even on camera in speeches. There, a woman, I'm sorry I don't have the details, but someone could easily dig this up. It was just a few months ago, a woman came to light crowing about how they had organized a whole team of people to essentially use Wikipedia for activism. And that's essentially the way that she put it. And, it's amazing to me that it's not supposed to be that way. It actually is supposed to. And this is what Jimmy Wales would say. If you were to ask him, he would say, this, of course, is what we're trying to do. We're trying to give the broad sense of all the different points of view, significant points of view on a topic. That's the way it's supposed to work. We should hold him to that. But he can't. You can find too many instances where there is an approved point of view, and only that may be expressed. So it's no longer the neutral point of view at all.
And there's one particular controversy. I'll get your opinion on this one, but I'm sure you've read and seen plenty of this in the news. This is the Philip Cross phenomenon
Sure.
on Wikipedia. I'll just put
another bit of evidence. If you really add all of the evidence of like nefarious editing up that has accumulated over the years, there actually is a lot. Somebody could easily write a book, but go on.
But so the Philip Cross, the hundreds of thousands of edit entries here, all targeting, a lot of them anti-war websites, editors, journalists. So somewhat defamatory, I guess, and pejorative. You could say this was also kind of seen on the vaccine issue during COVID. A lot of the kind of anti-vaxxers, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he got an anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist. That was the sort of strap line on his bio there. And then when someone went to change it, it got changed back. And you'd see this Philip Cross avatar appearing in all these entries. Almost seemed humanly impossible, Larry. I mean, granted, he's reported as being an autist, but even then, it's a pretty superhuman feat there for Philip Cross. Did you ever get a chance to kind of look into that one?
Well, there's so many examples of that general category of problem that I don't follow up on them all. It's a pattern. And it's fairly straightforward to describe the pattern. When it becomes clear that a certain line, the narrative, as it is sometimes called, is being pushed by the mainstream media, that is the thing that is basically the only position that is allowed on Wikipedia. Now, perhaps they can find some counterexamples, and of course, it really depends on the kind of issue. But for the most part, let's just say that Wikipedia has no compunctions about taking controversial positions, even positions that later turn out to be just false, right? And in this way, it resembles the mainstream media. It's basically become another organ of the mainstream media. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, it is kind of a natural evolution, isn't it? With any widely adopted platform, there is this sort of tectonic drift, isn't there, towards that phenomenon. So it's kind of, in a way, Larry, unavoidable when you get to a certain scale that's going to happen.
The weird thing is, though, that you wouldn't necessarily expect out of Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is supposed to be open. It's supposed to be available for anybody to contribute to, unlike like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, TikTok. Those things, again, are, have this corporate moderating structure, which is, well, it was unveiled a little bit by Elon Musk in the case of Twitter, but exactly how it works it's still pretty mysterious, frankly, on a day-to-day basis. Wikipedia is supposed to be everything out in the open, but as I said, there's a lot of back channel dealings, and so that's what makes it possible for this for the same sort of narrative pushing to take place in what should be an open project.
And speaking of open projects, when Musk took over Twitter from Jack Dorsey and from the publicly traded Twitter went private, and there was this thing called the Twitter files where Elon Musk gave access to email tranches. Matt Taibbi, other Michael Schellenberger, independent journalists, got in there and went through it, and a lot of people were shocked by what they found in terms of backroom. You talk about backroom dealing between government directly, the DHS, the FBI, the NSA, the CIA. It was just a real revelation at the time. I mean, were you surprised when you saw the scope and the depth of all of that information, that all that was going on during the kind of Jack Dorsey regime, a regime where I was booted from that platform for a year and a half, along with others. But what were your impressions on when that broke?
I was surprised. I was mostly surprised in that they were willing to allow that much information out, and that earned Elon Musk quite a bit of cred in the free speech scene, I guess you could say. But I'm still not a 100% sold fan of his, because I actually think that the control continues on under the new regime. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss, to a great extent. And well, you know that the same thing happened with Katherine Mayer. She just came out. She didn't. It was an unforced revelation. You know, she said that, yeah, we were working hand in hand with government to fight misinformation about COVID. You know, I mean, wow. So, in the strange thing is, she's not supposed to do that as the CEO of Wikipedia. The executives aren't really supposed to have any editorial control over Wikipedia. And so she has two different kinds of questions to answer here. One is, what the heck is an open project doing, you know, working with the government at all? I mean, that's the big one, of course. I mean, where do you get off thinking you can do that? Okay, and then the other is the internal question, which is of interest to Wikipedians throughout the years, which is, well, like, what exactly was the mechanism that she used? Does she have like some people that she uses? Who are these people? You know, that when she wants to actually push something, some instructions that she received from the government, are there like a set of people that she calls upon to execute her will? I'd like to know.
Actually, funny you should ask, Larry. There is a sort of high table, as you were. There's a few of these organizations. You're familiar with a couple of the First Draft Coalition and these sort of consortiums that have people from the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the venerated legacy media outlets, heads of Wikipedia. They're also on these boards as well. They're sort of advisory boards. And I think they came into fruition in the aftermath of the Donald Trump shock and awe 2016 election, and right. under the clarion call, the 5-alarm fire for Western democracy, which was Russian interference and Russian disinformation. That's where they came from, Larry.
Oh, and I know, it's crazy. Yes, they had to have some scapegoat in order to start to put some sort of legitimate face on, all this talk about misinformation, and fighting misinformation. So
Catherine, you mentioned Katherine Mayer, former, I believe, head of Wikipedia, or that organization, the governing organization Wikipedia. Then she moved on to NPR national public radio, and that sort of triggered a controversy itself. But I've got a video clip, one of the many video clips of her that are in circulation that people are kind of looking at right now. I'm going to play that video clip, Larry, and I want to get your thoughts and reactions to what she says here. So just listen.
I started by talking about the idea of free and open as some of our founding principles, sort of free and open source, coming from the idea of the open source community. Well, I have come to the opinion and the perspective that free and open was a way of looking at the world that was inherently limited relative to what we were trying to achieve. Free and open has the best of intentionality, but in the end, what free and open often ended up doing, and particularly in the case of Wikipedia, was really recapitulating many of the same power structures and dynamics that exist offline prior to the advent of the internet. And so what we ended up seeing was Wikipedia really rebuilt this idea of knowledge as a whole around what the Western canon. You see the exclusion of communities, of languages, because of the ways in which Wikipedia is based on reliable sources. The idea of a written tradition is something that is particular to many, the idea of a written tradition, which is particular to some cultures and not to others. The ways in which we ascribe notability often really comes from sort of this white male, Westernized construct around who matters in societies and who is elevated in whose voices. And so some of these ideas of sort of this radical openness really did not end up with the intention, really did not end up living into the intentionality of what openness can be.
Wow. So there, she's really wearing her heart on her sleeve, ideologically speaking, Larry. What's your reaction to that when you saw it?
It's almost as if she's trying to alienate and piss off libertarian defenders of Western civilization, like myself, and it's very strange. She talks like a true believer in wokeness, which is something I didn't know at all about Katherine Mayer. I mean, it doesn't surprise me terribly much, but I didn't know that. But yeah, it's amazing that she would actually admit, that she would come out and just say, yeah, I don't really believe in this free and open stuff. Because I mean, it's not an exaggeration. That's pretty much what she said. And she said that this methodology, freedom and openness, led to sort of a recapitulation of this, white male hegemonic Western,
patriarchal vertical power structures. I don't know.
So, she's been well indoctrinated, I must say. Her professors must be proud. So yeah, I mean, what
is she? That's not a unique position though, because Facebook, Jack Dorsey, and had a huge moderation operation at Twitter, Google, YouTube. But there's definitely a uniformity of thought at that level on big tech, right? Well,
just as there is at universities, especially among younger people, that universities have been radicalized since we went to college, basically, very much so. I mean, I thought that my professors were quite liberal back in the 80s, and then when I became a professor in the 2000s, I thought I could see that it was much worse. But now, I mean, they have no compunctions whatsoever about describing what they're doing as activism, and their students, like Katherine Mayer and people younger than her. So those would be the staff that do the moderation, and even the ones who set the policy to a great extent. Yeah, those people were trained by professors who think that the job of a responsible professional, academic or otherwise, now is to change the world, to remake the world for the socialist revolution, essentially. As near as I can tell, that seems to be what drives them.
So a tremendous amount of power concentrated in top decision-making positions in these organizations that basically control huge swaths of the information ecosystem that we interact and consume on a daily basis. Now, has there been a little course correction, or is there a little course correction going on here? And I've seen stories like this. I've been at NPR 25 years. Here's how we lost America. Yuri Berliner, veteran public radio editor there. It shows she's moved to this organization, NPR, and now they're getting hounded for basically not being objective. So what do you think? Is there something, is the system going into a correction mode at all, Larry?
I hope so. The correction, what you describe as a correction, is a backlash by older liberals and libertarians and conservatives against younger people who, again, have been radicalized, and people, even the Democrats and the old liberals who are my age and a little younger and certainly older, we grew up, if we were in like academia or media, with an absolute solid agreement on free speech and on the open society. These are things that Republicans and Democrats agreed upon, and those are only the true leftists, and also I would add just people who were trained in the establishment and who are not terribly ideological. They just want to like get ahead. There's a lot of people like that too. But nevertheless, only those people are able to switch gears. And so the old guard is now essentially, I think, naturally at odds with younger editors. So,
and we got this NPR is headline here from this piece by John Cass. Are federal tax dollars going for Marxist news, partisan censorship, pamphlets? Now, interesting article here. He basically says, will you pay me and subsidize me? He's ostensibly a conservative, I suppose. And he says, I have a very fringe minority views. I'm an extreme right winger or extreme conservative. And how would you feel about subsidizing my operation with public money? And this is what I'm going to cover. It's kind of a brilliantly written piece, although really extreme, but he kind of makes a good point. And so now there's an investigation. I think there's a House investigation, Larry. They're calling for a look at NPR's objectivity. So a little bit of a shakeup here at Washington.
I hope they're successful. But you know that Generation X, the millennial generation is the first that where I would say majority of the people trained in universities are hostile to the ideals of free speech, for whom activism is just a way of life and the way that institutions should be run. And sure, Congress can push back and maybe they'll do a bit of a course correction, but in time, you know, the millennials are going to come into power, and then what? I don't know.
Well, the millennials, the Gen Zers, they'll be in power in 15 or 20 years. So, and the shoes have on a little bit moved to the other foot in the last couple of weeks, Larry. So now you know, we, as you say, the left-wing student activists are now basically being under the sort of hammer of a new piece of legislation, this anti-Semitism legislation that's being kind of rushed through the system in the House. So again, it's moving to the left is now becoming the target of maybe weaponizing the instruments of authority in government, which they use to point at conservatives just last week, you know. So that's an interesting development. I think this could be positive in the long run, Larry, if both sides realize that, you know, we need to back off and focus on the First Amendment, for instance. What do you think?
I hope you're right. I mean, that would be nice. I'm a little bit skeptical simply because things have been traveling in this direction, and the younger generation is, as I said, they have been indoctrinated. I mean, one of the most alarming things, frankly, about society today, apart as a specific application of the problem of education being utterly captured at all levels by the left, all right, is the fact that there has not been any inculcation of the American civic religion. In other words, you don't learn about the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. You cannot articulate any reasons for why somebody would think that free speech is a good thing. You know, all these sorts of things, they should be taught, and they're not. And what we're about to see what happens when there is a whole generation of people who are simply not taught such things. And I have a feeling it's not going to end well. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right.
So when you're talking about civics, you're talking about, you know, that sort of 13, 14, as a junior high into high school, we got absolutely inundated with civics, American history, how elections work, checks and balances in government. Those were drilled into us in American I went through public schools, so that I had the full program. But that stayed with me. That was kind of my ballast. And it remains my ballast as an adult when I participate in the political process. So that's where I will measure everything. Whether I've been in both parties, I've been a Democrat and Republican over the years. So, but I've always used that as my sort of compass, which is that system is the most important thing for both parties. And as I forgot who said this, maybe it was Thomas Jefferson, that an eagle needs two wings to fly. It needs a right and a left. And so I'm not sure if that was him or not, but some famous American political said that. But I always remembered that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, the joys and wonders of the two-party system, for example, that isn't explained. And no, I've been reading. I homeschool my boys, and I've been reading the Constitution and explaining the Constitution in depth, like clause by clause, and so forth. And you know, my guys are pretty well educated, I suppose, for their age. Not very well educated. But yeah, that's kind of shocked at what they didn't understand. Of course, that's my fault. But they, you know, this is something that I think parents are going to have to do with their children if they don't get it from schools. You know, just take a meal, read through the Constitution at meal times. That's what I do. So.
So back to Wikipedia. So you envision a better way of performing the job of what Wikipedia was meant to do, and you've got a new project, the Encyclosphere,
Yes.
if I pronounce that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of your foundation. I know this is a big part of your work right now, Larry. But how is this different fundamentally from Wikipedia, and does it have great scalability? What is the utility, and what's the difference between this and Wikipedia?
All right. So what is it? What is the difference? And what is essentially the benefit and the scalability? Fine. So the Encyclosphere is you could describe it as a collection of all the encyclopedias. So in the same way that the blogosphere is a collection of all the blogs, the Encyclosphere is a collection of all the encyclopedias. We have a representation of about 66 encyclopedias now. So that is our window into the Encyclosphere, and spread across 2 different collections of encyclopedias, EncycloSearch and EncycloReader. They act as meta search engines, but also readers for the free encyclopedia articles. The need that it fulfills is the preservation of knowledge, and simply by putting everything under one umbrella, not to say under one leadership, because this is just a way of aggregating knowledge, essentially trying to make a network of what already exists, connecting together knowledge in many different forms, not imposing any requirements on anyone, but just simply gathering it together. The idea is that we would like to be able to archive in a permanent, digitally signed fashion information from many different sources, so that we don't have to use Wikipedia. I actually think the thing that there is the greatest need for is articles in the long tail, and we can address that. And by the long tail, that's this old internet theory jargon. That's kind of old now, but the idea is that most people, most of the time, search for a relatively small set of terms. But in fact, there's another set, what's called a long tail, if you will, popularity of different searches, a long tail of searches that are less popular, but nevertheless explain why Wikipedia is as popular as it is, because it's got articles on all of that stuff too, and really long articles on the popular topics. But we need to have articles of that sort from other sources. So what I'm trying to do is to persuade authors to write those articles and to promote the work of in other encyclopedias, essentially, and as I say, to serve as an archive. This is going to be, I think, increasingly important, especially if the files are digitally signed in the age of AI, when people start asking, has this been edited recently? How can we know what it said back in the day? So another thing that we're doing is we're actually digitizing and bringing more fully online the individual articles from old public domain encyclopedias. And eventually, what I'd like to do is to make an AI front end for all of the encyclopedias, but that is hard. That is a very hard problem to solve. That requires a lot of funding, and we are in need of funding, actually, at this point. But there's other things too. Wouldn't it be cool if you could take all of the oldest, public domain encyclopedias, put them, train an AI based on them, and then have a conversation with an AI that was trained on information older than the 20th century? What would it be like?
That brings up an interesting point. Okay, so with the current Wikipedia, the wiki system, it's kind of a mishmash. You've got the editors changing things in real time. You've got all of these web articles and digital articles that are pinged to the bottom of their references and so forth. But is there a need, in your opinion, for more of a canon when it comes to certain types of knowledge, like something that meets some kind of a consensus standard in certain subject areas? What's the value of this? Because this is something that they're really struggling with in education. From the teachers I've spoken with, the way that the kids interact with information now is totally different, and also the way teachers are presenting it is different as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the words standard and canon mean different things in different domains. So when we talk about knowledge standards, in our name, Knowledge Standards Foundation, we're actually talking about digital standards, technical standards. When you're talking about a canon of things to study, or state standards in the domain of education, and you mean something entirely different. And I'm in favor of that to a certain extent anyway. At least, let's put it this way. I think that standards, well, I think that there are such things as classics, that they need to be read, and that it would be nice if they were part of the standards, if we must have standards. On the general sort of philosophical question, whether what is required to be learned by all citizens, whether that should be standardized, I'm not sure what I think about that. But that's not really the political question before us, because that's been decided. Yes, there are going to be state standards. And so I would agree with you, and I think it's actually very important that there is a baseline of knowledge that's extremely important that we have in common. So I agree strongly with, I don't know if I have the book here on my shelf in front of me, but there is an old professor of English, maybe you remember his name, I can't recall his name, who defended the idea of basic knowledge that all of us should be inculcated with. I teach my kids from the great books. You know, they've gone through them fairly slowly, it's. I think it teaches kids how to think, which is probably why we're not doing it. I mean, that's probably why society has sort of given up on that as an ideal, because, you know, our fearless leaders don't really want people who think. They certainly don't have pass policies that have that as an aim.
Yeah, when I went back to school, I went back late as a student to do my master's degree. I was in my late 40s, you could say, and I was very cocky. I thought I knew everything about politics and the world. So I thought, what are these teachers going to tell me? I've been on the ground in the Middle East and whatever. And I had to read a lot. I mean, I was made to read things that I would never have touched before, things I didn't agree with as well. But that intense period of 12 months, 18 months, where I was doing that reading, years later, Larry, I'm still drawing off that.
Yeah, so for sure.
I can't tell people. There's something about books as well that being able to the focus that's required when you have a book in your hand, as opposed to reading digitally when you have all the distractions around you. So it's hard.
Let me show you something, if I may. So I am putting all of Project Gutenberg on these things. on 128 gig flash drives. I'm using ChatGPT-4. The GPT and I are working on software for searching and reading this. It should be ready in a few weeks. And people who donate to the Knowledge Standards Foundation will get one of these 70,000 books on removable media that cannot be censored because you'll have the media with the books on it. And that's the sort of thing that I think has to exist. We have to start thinking in those terms. We need to start thinking in terms of preserving knowledge in many copies that cannot be shut down. Kind of like guns. You know, there's so many guns that it would be really, really hard for somebody, for a regime to actually go and take them all away, right? It's not going to happen. And if you've got many, many different copies of the essential knowledge that we should all have, then it's never going to be taken away.
Yeah, and so from that USB stick that you have there, you could go to print with that if you so choose. So that was the big fear with Wikipedia and these types of social media archiving, is that you could have this real-time censorship where you could actually alter history exactly as George Orwell described it in 1984. The party can just go in and say that's no longer true. Now this is the history, and then it will change next week again. And we're kind of seeing that with a lot of arbitrary weaponization of language and information. So I like your brick and mortar thinking. It's funny, Larry, that outside the box thinking would be construed by some people as being a Luddite. You're talking about hard copies, and but it is practical. You know, we can do that with everything, really. I mean, we don't have to be networked on the phones the way that we use our cell phones, the way the networks are configured, our servers, our internet domain system. There's lots of different.
I'll show you another example. Another example is right down here. You see the black box right here.
Yep.
That is where about half of the apps that I use on my phone are run from. So I don't have Dropbox at all. I got rid of it entirely, right? So like my photos are all in this photo app, which runs from there. And my audio, like I've digitized a lot of my old CDs and stuff, so that's there. And so forth. So self-hosting is also a thing, and it needs to get bigger. So, and the name for the kind of box that people are looking into, like buying one for themselves, hosting their own stuff, it's a NAS, N-A-S. That's what it is. Network attached storage.
NAS drive. So video at people who work in film, they're familiar with that kind of equipment because they use it. So you're saying that you can basically take control of the whole thing and be your own host, basically, right?
It's hard to do email, and it's hard to do the social media so far, but we're working on ways of decentralizing that too. But there, the problem is the network effects that are required in order for a social media system to become competitive with the giant platforms. So
who do you see right now as the pioneers? There's a lot going on, Web3 and changes in DNS approaches and things like that. So where do you see as who's pushing the envelope right now? Who are the sort of groups or the collectives and persons, innovators that you're kind of noticing that looks like they're showing some promise?
I wish I could give you a name of a group that jumps out. I would like to put in a good word for Futo, based in Austin, futo.org. We're still very grateful to the hundreds of thousands that they've given to the Knowledge Standards Foundation. And they also have, they're working on some apps of their own. but I think the thing that's really going to make a difference in the long run is actual files on servers that are networked together independently of corporations. That is hard to do. Generally speaking, when a system like Blue Sky, for example, which is Jack Dorsey's open Twitter alternative, essentially, I don't know that that's going to take off. And the fact that Jack Dorsey started it kind of means that it's probably not, trustworthy anyway. No, I'm sorry, I don't have good news on that front. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of organizations that are having a go. Part of the problem, actually, to be quite honest, is that there are too many different organizations that are proposing many different standards, which is an interesting fact in itself, actually. And what that means is that the people who are passionately in favor of freedom and openness, all the things that Katherine Mayorga doesn't like, they are spread out across many different projects. What there desperately needs to be are unifying standards. But, as they say, we need, as the meme, according to the meme, you could probably find it, there needs to be one unifying standard for all of these standards. It becomes a new standard, that's all. Yeah. It's a hard problem. If it weren't a hard problem, it would have been solved.
What about AI? Got a couple minutes left. You mentioned ChatGPT. You've employed it as an agent under your command. So, what's your experience been like so far with the new sort of complex language bots?
I think that for now, anyway, I would say they are forces for good. They're labor multipliers for developers and even for editors. Frankly, I actually use it for two different purposes myself. I use it to write code, and I'm writing a book. So I'll actually feed it a few pages at a time and have it give feedback. And depending, it can be very, very useful. It's quite amazing, though. I'm just speaking about my own experience, and obviously the fact that the latest engines can create songs from scratch and videos that are photorealistic is just utterly mind-blowing, obviously. I'm not really sure what to say about that, except that what it really means is going forward, there's going to be a whole new layer of technology that developers are going to have to be really solid on, and that is cryptography and digital signing. Because basically information that is put out onto the internet before too long is all going to have to be digitally signed, right? And that then raises the whole issue of who owns the digital identities that are used to do the signing. See, the point of a digital signature, I should explain that. The point of a digital signature is to say that this file came from this public identity somewhere. Okay, so you can show that only that identity on Sanger's server could have produced this signature, which is attached to a file. And it's a way of proving that that particular file, or an email, because email uses the same technology, that bit of information came from a particular source. Now, if you can trust that a particular identity is that of a real human being, then you have a way of showing that some content has its source with that human being. And going forward, I have a bad feeling that there's going to be just the internet is going to change a lot, because it's going to be flooded with AI generated crap. I mean, it's already the case, right? Auto generated search results, doing Google search results is already, it's like, why bother anymore practically? That's because half of the results, especially when you drill down very far on certain topics, they are just auto-generated garbage.
I can tell you in the financial world, this is a problem. You've got AI generating financial articles based on reading market signals, which are then feeding into black box trading algorithms that are basically moving markets. So it's like one sort of internal feedback loop that's all pretty much all algorithm generated. So you could have the same problem in the literary or cultural information space. That's kind of what you're alluding to there, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. I think it's broader. The whole, basically, every human production online, essentially, if they can do difficult programming and video, right? Which they're not quite there yet, right? So, like, give it a few years, but that's it. In a few years, that's what we will be faced with. So that it will, I mean, you will be able to wonder if there is a dead internet, and that, like, it's all just bots talking to bots, right? And what I'm saying is, what's going to happen going forward is there will be these new services where everything that comes out in the system has been digitally signed, so it can be proven that it came from a human being, right? Yes, but then the big question is, who owns the digital identities that are associated with the digital signatures? And you don't want it to be Microsoft. You don't want it to be the government. You don't want it to be Google. You want to own it yourself. That's the bottom line. And this actually is one of the reasons why I say you guys got to get out there and buy your own NASs and buy your own domains, register your own email addresses. Like my email is larry@sanger.io. So it's my name, basically. And don't use Gmail. Just take the time. You know, this is a meaningful way you can strike a blow for liberty, essentially.
No, these are all first good practical things, and it's never been easier to do these things, Larry. The equipment and the tools are there. They're relatively inexpensive, and the know-how's there. You can basically self-teach yourself how to do all these things just through a few YouTube videos,
or just hire a geek to set up the NAS for you. It might cost an extra $100 or $200. It's not hard for the geek. So
yeah. And then security, there's options there. There's ways of cloaking and kind of concealing your identity online through various virtual networks and so forth. So there's a lot of options there. So yeah, I'm also positive on that front, Larry. I also see cryptocurrency as a kind of an interesting development in recent years that's kind of liberated a lot of people in that financial networks as well. It's not without its problems, of course. Many problems, but just generally, I think I see a lot of innovation going in those directions, a lot of energy, and a lot of smart people working in those spaces, but they're motivated by problem solving. And I've had a chance to spend time and meet more of them in the last year or so, and I'm really impressed with some of the people that are working in these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
yes, me too. Yes, I've been talking to a lot of those sorts of people. Worked for a crypto company before, but I actually think it's old technology. You know, the whole idea of key pair cryptography. Basically, it proves that that you are in control of information. That it came from you. That basic principle is basically lost when all of your data is rather associated with a platform and an account on a platform that you can log into, but you don't really own. Mm-hmm. So.
And also solves that cancel. In a way, it's moving towards solving that cancel culture problem as well with centralized platforms. That's maybe not an issue when you're talking about the decentralized world that you're trying to build. You and others are trying to build, Larry. So
rebuild. That's what the internet was, decentralized in the beginning, and it's been locked down, and the decentralized nature of the internet has been basically destroyed in just the last 15 to 20 years. That's it.
Yeah, it's happened very quickly. So hopefully the solutions will present themselves and people will take advantage of what's out there. But Larry Sanger, former founder of Wikipedia, the Knowledge Standards Foundation, Encyclosphere is the big project with your foundation. So if you want more information about that, folks, the links are down below the video as well. Follow Larry on X, formerly known as Twitter. And what are some of the platforms where you are?
You know, it's mostly Twitter these days and LarrySanger.org. I really do want to start blogging more and maybe putting some more videos out there. So where I'm on YouTube, but I'm going to try to push them also to BitChute, which I support.
And so definitely, folks, you definitely keep an eye on what Larry is innovating, and you're going to find out where this thing is headed, known as the internet, the decentralized internet, returning to its source. Hopefully, yeah. That's the idea. But Larry, thank you so much for joining us on the Sunday Wire. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and stay in touch. And do keep us abreast of any projects that you're working on as well. We're very happy to promote those.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Larry Sanger. Listen, we're going to take a break with the network, but when we come back, we're going to have a little bit of a wrap up in the final segment of Overdrive. A few things I want to share with you guys about my recent experience, and also something that we published at 21stcenturywire.com, which is, I think, an extraordinary interview, and it's going to move the dial, I think, on the conversation regarding Ukraine, and also the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage as well. Some new developments there. Stick around. We'll be back in just a few minutes.